Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when and where you are watching this. Um, we're live this morning. I haven't done a live in a little while. It's interesting. A couple weeks ago, I did three. Last week, I did none. That's just kind of how it works out sometimes. There's a lot of stuff going on. End of the year. Good morning. Good morning. Nice to see you. Um, There's a lot of stuff going on. Just, personally, my daughters are graduating from high school. They're getting ready to go off to college. They've got, end of the year senior stuff. They've got prom, other associated things. So I got really, really busy last week. Um, Not just with that, but clients and students and all kinds of things. Oh my. And so the other the other kind of thing that's going on is I'm teaching. I'm in the middle of teaching a 28-day class right now. Just past week one of that, so in the middle of that 28-day class, I'm teaching a live class this Thursday, which is free, by the way. If anybody's interested, it's on the Learn It Live platform. I'm teaching spiritual transformation, or the transformation of personal transformation through spiritual alchemy. So I'm going to, go through some of the basics of spiritual alchemy. I'm excited about that. It's one of my favorite topics. It's a topic I'm researching right now. So very excited about that. Today, I might talk a little bit about alchemy today. Um, the title of this talk, I'm sort of being tongue in cheek with the alliteration. I'm talking about Moore's metaphysical model. I named it after myself. It's not really my model. I don't claim any such thing. I'm just and my hair's crazy. Look at that. I gotta put some stuff in my hair and get it matted down. Um, so yeah, talking about a metaphysical model um, that I work with that is sort of a cosmology. It informs all of the spiritual work that I do, whether that's teaching or taking on clients, practicing shamanism, practicing folk magic or ritual or all of these things. This is a model in which I sort of frame the work that I do. And I'm going to share it with you today. Not that it needs to become your model. This is not a thing where I'm saying this is the capital T truth. This is a model, as are many of the things that we think of as truths. They are models of how things work. So take physics, for example, right? Physics is good morning. Good morning. Nice to see you. Physics is a very accurate model of how physical things work, right? And as there's more research done, the model is refined, right? And so the same is true for me with sort of my model of how things work spiritually. I refine that as it's more or less accurate for what I'm doing, and I refine it as I go along, as I learn new things, as I discover new things. Good morning, good morning. Lots of good mornings. Oh, thank you so much. I got to tell you, there's something about that first sip of coffee when I bring it up. It's a little ritual for me when I bring the coffee up and I smell it. I always smell it really deeply, and I recommend people really smell their food. What do you smell when you smell your food? Very often people don't eat very mindfully. I'm very guilty of that personally. But coffee, oh, you're at work listening. Okay, cool, cool. Welcome, welcome. But that first sip when I make the coffee and I kind of um, smell it in the kitchen, and then that first sip when I bring it up and I smell the coffee, it just, I don't know, um, gives me good feelings. Good morning, good morning. Happy to see you here, my friend. Um, so anyway, I'm talking about a model of metaphysics that I use more or less. And it's not to say that, again, a model is a thing that represents something, right? So our ideas about, our words are essentially models, right? When I say the word animal, we all know what that means, but we might get a different picture individually in our heads of what I mean by that. So all models suffer from two things: deletions and distortions. All models are inaccurate. They're accurate to some degree. And so it's up to us to decide if a model of something is useful, right? So I think about, like, I can build a model car. I used to, when I was a kid, I used to love building models. Maybe I'll do it again as an adult. I don't know. But I used to build lots of models, cars and rockets. I had this cool one. It was like a time machine. It was like this dome thing, and there were these scientists like in there, and then you closed a thing and you turned it around and you flipped it open and the scientists were getting attacked by a dinosaur. I just remember making that when I was 5 or 6 and thinking it was like the coolest thing ever. Um, so I can build a model car, right? And we can recognize that as a car. We can recognize that that's a car, right? It has the same general shape and color and properties and stuff like that, but it's not a car. It's not. It doesn't take the place. I can't get in it and drive somewhere. It's imperfect, and so to shrink it down and to represent it, let's say it's a model for kids, for example, we have to delete a lot of information. Like, it might not have a working engine in there, right? And the engine might not be completely 100% accurate, and it's also smaller, so it's distorted, and there's deleted information there. So all models have distortions and deletions, as complete as they might be. A good example of that is a map. If you've got a map, if I want to get from here to, you know the grocery store, I can use my GPS, right, which will give me the streets that I need to drive on. It'll give me turn by turn directions. It's really useful, really useful. And that is a model of the streets that I'm driving on, in my phone. And but it doesn't have everything. It doesn't have every pebble and every blade of grass and every um, thing. And some of the roads may not be 100% accurate, but the model is useful enough to do what I want to do. So that's a lot about models. That's basically what a model is. And there's an old expression. I don't know. I can't remember who came up with this. Um, but it's important to remember that the map is not the territory. So we have all these models of how things work. They're don't mistake them for the things. Don't mistake them for what they actually are. So a good example of that is, if you've ever studied in any Kabbalah or anything like that, they'll have this tree of life on which they map, the emanations down from the divine into the physical world, and vice versa, the way that you rise up through there. That's one model in Kabbalah. There are others. There are lots of others. Um, Again, it's a model. It is not the thing that is being represented. So we'll start from there. So my metaphysical model, my metaphysical cosmology, also suffers from distortion and deletion. I'm a human being. I have human experiences. I can't know everything. Um, and so everything comes through the filters of my experience. And we see this again and again, and different cultures will describe some of the same. When I read sort of comparative spirituality, comparative religion, um, I see many, many, many of the same concepts, but being filtered through a specific culture, right? And so, um, most polytheistic cultures, for example, have some sort of fertility goddess that is associated both with, human fertility, birth, and erotic love, and that sort of thing, but also with the fertility of the growth cycle of planting crops and animal husbandry and that sort of thing. So but that's always expressed through the lens of culture, right? It's usually a goddess that is in charge of that stuff. And that goes back to prehistoric times, even when they found these figurines buried, these 30,000-year-old female figurines buried throughout Europe, for example, but certainly in other places as well. Um, so there are these concepts that are somewhat universal, but they are, and it's always interesting to me that people fight over religious belief, that sort of thing. It seems really silly. Ultimately, if you boil it down to the teachings, everybody's kind of teaching the same thing. Not everybody's hearing the same thing. And people like really take stuff and twist it around and use it for hatred, which is, goes on way too much in the world. So so let me get into metaphysics a little bit. What do I mean by metaphysics? So metaphysics can be you know, a philosophical thing. It can be uh, the description of the origins of things, basically that which is comes before the physical. um Good morning. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes, yeah. Glad you're reading Robert Bruce's book. If I had it on my desk, I do not at the moment have it on my desk. I would show people. It's a book I highly recommend to people. Robert Bruce, called Energy Work, um by Robert Bruce. And he's in my opinion, a really pioneering person in the like he's come up with uh ways of doing energy work that are very powerful and still very simple and very easy to understand. He reminds me of my old martial arts teacher who the reason I wanted to study with him is that he could take something like, a movement or a technique or something and break it down and explain why things were done a certain way. So that sort of the scientific aspect behind it, and chunk it down into ways that different people could learn. So I appreciate that, and I aspire to those things as a teacher. When I'm teaching people, I try to meet people in their level, and um, you know, not their level. Like some people are higher than others, but like how people understand. People learn in different ways, and I like, as somebody with ADHD, when I learn something, I will get, three books about it and read them simultaneously. And then I will, not like holding three books, but I'll read like a chapter from one book and a chapter from another and then a chapter from another. And then I'll watch videos about it online, and then I'll, read some more, and I might listen to a podcast. And then eventually the learning sinks into this thick skull of mine. So, um, yeah, so everything is filtered. It's important to understand that we have filters. We have perceptual filters. Even like when you look out around you and you're seeing things, you're seeing objects arise in your consciousness. Even that is informed by your experience, right? By your beliefs, by your experience. There are there are remote cultures, like remote tribal cultures, where their reality is that because they live in like a closed in jungle environment, um, they don't they don't count anything. If anything is not in their immediate experience, it basically doesn't exist. And so they don't have, I can't remember the name of the tribe, but they've done, all these studies, and they don't have numbers in their language. They don't even conceive of it, right? Where, you know, with my education, I can, even imagine negative numbers and irrational numbers, and that sort of thing. Um, but for them, their reality is that if they're not perceiving it in their immediate environment, it doesn't exist. And they have word for, like, there's many of this thing, but not like there are seven of these things. And even anthropologists have gone in and tried to study them, we'll try to get them to count, like lay out little sticks or something. Okay, this is one, this is two, this is three. And they're like, what are you talking about? So for us to assume that we are experiencing reality objectively is just not a thing. There's no objective reality. You and I might have some consensus about things. I might hold this cup up and go, this is a green cup. And then somebody else seeing this might go, no, that's, more of a turquoise, or it's more of a sea foam, or it's more of colors is a place where this, falls apart. There was that whole thing on the internet a while back. What color is the dress? Is it blue? Is it gold? Is it black? Whatever. There are lots of uh, optical illusions out there that will demonstrate how our perception uh, is not just objective. It's not, everything we experience is filtered through the lenses of our culture, our learning, our beliefs. So you're absolutely right. Even when we get sort of downloads of information from spirit, that's coming to us in a formless way. And our imagination, our people think imagination means you're making things up. You're imagining this right now. You Yeah, there's sensory information hitting. You might be, if you're looking at this screen, you see a person, but you're not seeing a person. There's just light hitting your retinas, and you are in your experience, in your subjective experience. The experience of seeing a person arises. You're not hearing words. The just vibrations in the air are hitting your eardrums and causing, chemical electrical signals to go back into your brain, and that arises in your consciousness as speech, which are words which are put together into sentences that have certain meanings. And when I say a sentence, like even something simple like the brown dog is sleeping, each person is going to have a different subjective experience of that sentence, right? um you might picture a brown dog, and it's probably a different brown dog than I'm picturing and other people are picturing. But that's also really cool. It's also really a fun thing to understand that we're not alone, and that we are here in this world as little individualized bubbles of consciousness. So let me get into it a little bit. Let me get into cosmology and the sort of the model of metaphysics that I work from at the moment, and that might change down the road. I do think um, I do think having a somewhat flexible belief system really serves people well. If your belief system is inflexible, when you run into something that is outside of your belief system, it causes a number of issues. One, most people will just deny that doesn't exist because I don't believe in it. Because I know everything in the world there is to know, and therefore my belief system is the only correct one, right? Um, the the uh, the other problem that can create is a significant amount of cognitive dissonance, which is that uncomfortable feeling from trying to hold conflicting beliefs in your head. If you can get past the cognitive dissonance and say, I can try this belief on and see if that works for me, and I can try this belief on. And if you want to know, like one of the beautiful phrases that comes out of the Huna tradition is that effectiveness is the measure of truth, right? If you play with a belief and that works really well for you, then it's true for you. If you play with a belief and it's causing problems, and we have to use some discernment to determine that, but then it doesn't really work for you. What's the difference between cosmology and astrology? So cosmology in general is the idea of like how the universe was created, basically. How things work underneath it all. And astrology is, using stars and planets and things like that to um, get information. So they're very different, very different things. And I understand we know cosmos generally refers to like outer space and that sort of thing. But in this case, I'm talking about how I'm talking about a model of sort of how the universe exists and that sort of thing. And I'll say that the model that I use is I have developed it from similarities that I see in across belief systems, right? So, in the beginning of all things, before the Big Bang, let's assume for a moment that the Big Bang is a thing, but there are alternate physical theories of how the universe was created. They're all called the Big Something. There's one called the Big Slurp, which I, I just find really funny. And I'm expecting 7-Eleven to at some point to come out with some cosmic drink called the Big Slurp or something like that. But let's just say the Big Bang. There was something like the Big Bang that created the universe 14.5 billion years ago. Before that happened, everything in the universe, the entire universe, the trillions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, in this universe that we exist, this physical universe, existed as something. We don't quite know what, but it was infinitesimally small, smaller than the smallest particle we can think of. And before that, there was no time and no space, right? Everything was unity and oneness. There was no differentiation. And then for whatever reason, the universe decided to explode and expand. And we don't know why, right? This is sort of the prevailing physical description of how the universe was created and expanded. And then it was basically just hydrogen um, atoms throughout the universe and just particles. And there are all of these physical forces like gravity and the weak and strong nuclear forces and magnetism and all of these laws. And if they were not exactly perfect, so if gravity were off by some tiny fraction, the physical universe as it exists now would not exist. It would just fly apart. But we have gravity and it works perfectly for this physical universe. So these clouds of hydrogen would just coalesce and be attracted to each other through gravity, and over time we get denser and denser and denser and denser and form stars. And stars are big fusion reactors, and so they crunch these hydrogen atoms together to create the other elements. So all of the elements besides hydrogen that make up everything that every physical thing that you encounter, most of that was born out of the belly of these stars. So everything, carbon, nitrogen, gold, silver, um, iron, everything, all of these elements, the whole periodic table above hydrogen, created in the belly of these stars that would eventually collapse, go supernova, and spray stuff all over the universe, and which form planets. And here we are, right? 14.5 billion years ago, there was nothing. And now we have toasters. That's my brief history, very brief history of the universe. Um, so in alchemy and in other, and I consider alchemy a sort of crossover between spiritual and physical traditions. Um, they were always trying to move towards the prima materia, what that original material was. Now, physically, that would be hydrogen, but they're talking about the underlying spiritual concept of the initial material out of which all things were created. Um, so that's sort of the physical explanation. In Taoism and other systems like Kabbalah and all that sort of thing, the universe starts off as this just emptiness. I think it's called Wu or Wu Ji in Chinese. And in Kabbalah, it's called Ein Sof Or. It's just a field of infinite light, and it's conscious. There is consciousness there. We might refer to this consciousness as God or source or the universe or whatever word you want to use. I generally avoid using the word God because there's a lot of baggage there. You know, people think it's a white-haired dude that lives in the clouds and throws thunderbolts. That's Zeus, but that's where we get a lot of our ideas about God. But so I'm going to use the word source. But if you prefer to use the word God or Yahweh or Hashem or whatever, totally fine. Totally fine. So there is some consciousness, there's some oversoul. Brahman is another word from Sanskrit, the oversoul, the universal soul, universal consciousness. So there's this one consciousness. So imagine you are this infinite consciousness for a moment, and you decide for whatever reason, maybe you're bored or whatever, like I want to have experiences. I want to experience things. What would you need to do to have experiences? Um, well, there's nothing else but your consciousness. So you would need to, create a universe or two or trillion, right? And spread your consciousness throughout this universe, and then create sort of obstacles for your consciousness to bounce off of, to have experience arise, right? Physical things. And then you want to have all kinds of different experiences. So you create the illusion of separateness, of separation, right? You create this illusion that, you know, we experience this as human beings. I feel, in some ways, I feel like I'm separate from you. You feel like you're separate from me. But we all exist in this giant field of consciousness. And so, what are the descriptions of Brahman? What are the descriptions of God? What are the descriptions of Source that cross all of these different cultures? Omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient. So, all powerful, all present, and all seeing, aware, essentially aware of everything. And omnipresence is the important thing here. That means the consciousness of source is everywhere. There is nowhere that it is not this source. That means that we are a part of it. We are swimming in source consciousness. Our consciousness is a individuation of source consciousness. And so from that perspective, we are in fact divine, even our physical bodies. Which, by the way, it is very easy to fall into the trap that I am my spirit, my soul, my consciousness is inside my physical body. That's an illusion. It happens because our sense organs are on top of and inside of our physical body. When we see things, when we perceive things through our eyesight, for example, we're experiencing them through our eyeballs, which are inside our skull. So it feels very much like we are in here, as opposed to another way of thinking about it, which I think is a little more powerful, in that this body is inside my consciousness. My consciousness is, first of all, non-local. We cannot reduce the subjective experience to electrical activity in the brain. It's something they have not been able to, they're trying really, really hard. And now there are all these theories. Consciousness is a quantum thing, because we throw the word quantum out there very often when we can't explain things, particularly not with classical physics, right? How could subjective experience be reduced to electrical impulses, even in a complex system like the brain, a very complex system like the human brain, right? So if you've heard of Schrodinger's cat, the famous physics thought experiment, was named after Erwin Schrödinger, who is a famous quantum physicist. And Erwin Schrödinger said, so here's a guy, quantum physicist, pioneering quantum physicist, and some of his stuff has been just recently proven out. Some of the things that he was thinking about, that they were able to, using really amazing technology, they were able to take images of these individual nitrogen atoms as they were morphing between solid objects and waves, right? So even the things that we think of as solid exist in more states than just solid. They exist as also as waves of energy, and they were able to prove that out very recently. It was very cool. I read a very cool article about it just the other day. But that's what he said. Anyway, the number of consciousnesses in the universe is one, right? So here's a guy plumbing the secrets of the universe, how the whole universe works, and he sees the consciousnesses of the universe as being one. So there's this underlying unity consciousness, and that is very, very common across different cultures. But again, they're speaking about it in different terms. So in Buddhist terms, there's something called Indra's web, right? And Indra's web is this giant jeweled web that connects everything and everyone underneath it all, right? In Norse belief, ancient Norse belief, there's what they call the web of weird. Weird, like we use the way we use the word weird in English is very new to me. It's something strange or unusual. Weird had the meaning in Germanic languages of fate, meaning associated with fate. And so like the Norns were like weaving the web of weird, weaving our fate together, but it's a way that everything is interconnected. And if you think of it as like a big, the universe is like this big tapestry. When we pull on our individual cord in the tapestry, it moves all of the other cords. All right, we are interconnected. So this is represented in lots of different ways. But when I see that happening, when I see these disparate cultures that didn't really have contact with each other expressing things that are very much the same that they came to independently, um, that holds a lot of weight for me. That informs my belief, right? Um, so the the spiritual so the Big Bang model of physical creation of the universe, um, I think, is also what they're talking about in different spiritual systems, but again through the lens of culture that becomes mythology, right? And how the universe was created out of so in Norse mythology you have the in the beginning there was just this giant gap. There was the great nothingness. It's described in Taoism, that's described in Kabbalah, right? So again, these different disparate cultures describing something, this great nothingness. And then in that great nothingness, the ice world and the lava world, which apparently also existed, came together. The ice melted. A cow came out of the ice. The cow started licking the ice. A giant came out of that. The first gods were born out of the giant's body. Um, you know, the the giant emir is um, is hermaphroditic, is both male and female, right? So interesting. So you have the nothingness, and then you have this something, but this something has not differentiated into masculine and feminine forces yet. That also exists in Kabbalah. In Kabbalah, you have Kether at the top of the model, which is the crown. That is the first thing, but it hasn't divided into masculine and feminine yet. But then it does, like on the tree of life, it drops down into Bina, the feminine aspect, and Chokmah, the masculine aspect. And then, all of these other things happen until you get to the very bottom, in which the physical universe is created, in which we are created. In Taoism, you have the emptiness, and then you have the Tao is the one thing, and then that differentiates into yin and yang. So you've probably seen yin yang, right? Or using a very American accent, yin yang, yin and yang. It's yin and yang. But so that again, that's differentiating into the divine masculine and divine feminine aspects. And from those two things in the Tao, they say the 10,000 things are created. 10,000 is just a number that means so many we can't count, right? so many things. Everything essentially is created from those two things. That model is repeated over and over and over again in different cultures, but again through the veil of the culture and the mythology. So um, one way to describe this model is a model of emanations, right? So everything is emanating from a single source. Everything is coming from, we could say God, we could say source, everything is split out from there. So one of the ways that I describe this is if we were to imagine source as this infinite beam of white light, right? And white light contains the entire spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, not the entire electromagnetic, but the entire light spectrum. Anyway, it contains all the colors, essentially, white light. And so we have this infinite beam, and it's just shooting through space. Now, if you shine a flashlight into space and there's nothing for it to bounce off of, it just keeps going and doesn't, it spreads out, but it just keeps going. And viewed from the side, you wouldn't see anything at all because you only perceive light that's bouncing off of things. So this infinite beam of white light, again, it says, I want to have some experiences. I want to differentiate. I want to experience myself. I want to feel limits. I want to, right now it's unlimited. And so if you take that beam of white light, and you might have done this in school at some point, and you place a prism in front of that white light. That prism differentiates the light into the entire rainbow. And then you have to put physical objects for that rainbow of light to bounce off of. So the rainbow, the individual bits of that spectrum, that's what we are. We are this individuated consciousness beyond the prism. What happens if you could turn the source off? If you could turn off the white light, the source, we cease to exist. Any perception, any experience of anything ceases to exist because there's nothing illuminating it. There's no that light is the light of consciousness. There's nothing illuminating anything. One way to think of consciousness is a light that we shine on things in which experience arises. So our consciousness kind of bounces off things that we perceive as separate objects, but we're not really separate from them. We're connected, and mysticism or metaphysics is about retracing our steps back to the source to identify closer with source consciousness, with our godhood, with our source, the God mind inside of us, the God consciousness inside of us. And again, inside is a metaphor. It's everywhere. We are inside of it is really a better description. So becoming one, becoming non-dual meaning not two, not separate from. The thing that separates us out from experiencing source consciousness we'll call ego, right? And ego has different definitions. If you go to Freud, he's got one definition of ego. What I mean by ego is the collection of beliefs and stories and perceptual filters that we have about ourselves, about who we are, who I am. For example, when I say I think of myself as John. John is just a label pointing to this. But when I feel like I am a separate being, when I feel like this body is who I am, or my name, or my titles, or my education, or my family, or whatever it is I'm identifying with, that is my ego. So the work of mysticism, the work of metaphysics, is to not to. A lot of people will talk about ego death. I don't love that term. I think the ego is useful. It's just that we don't want to over-identify with it. We want to know that it's our ego. When I express myself and say I'm going to do a live Facebook thing, I know that's my ego talking about this body and this mind. And hopefully, if I can step out of the way a little bit while I'm talking to you, some of that source consciousness can come through and inform my words and inform my actions. And that's the job of metaphysics. That's the role of metaphysics in my life anyway, is to allow more of that source consciousness to come through this body and this mind, at least while I'm here on this earth. After I die, something else will happen. But while I'm here now, my job, my role is in shamanic terms. So, a term from shamanism is to quote unquote become the hollow bone, right? The hollow bone is a concept you can imagine, a bone or a reed that has been hollowed out. So, it's like a tube. So, the goal, the ultimate goal of shamanism also happens to be the ultimate goal of enlightenment and Buddhism, and the ultimate goal of Christ consciousness and Christian mysticism, and the ultimate goal of returning to source in Kabbalah. These are all the same things, again, through different cultural lenses. But becoming the hollow bone means you become a clear channel for spirit, clear channel for source to work through you. And in shamanism, that's usually done for, for healing purposes or for divination purposes, that sort of thing. But it doesn't have to be. It can be for your own personal enlightenment, for your own personal spiritual development. So we differentiate to have these experiences. We have these experience of sort of the I and the me, right? And the I is the subject. I do this for me, or I do this for myself, right? I is the subject. So when we go in and we find where that I is, where the I comes from, the sense of I-ness, it's really deep and it's really formless. It's really not attached to the body. When we say me, we're thinking of ourselves as an object. I realize this is a linguistic thing, but um at least in English, this concept kind of works. And so again, we are having our consciousness is subjective, is first person subjective, meaning we feel like we're experiencing this as an individual. Now, with certain spiritual work, one can learn to perceive things from multiple perspectives simultaneously, or take on a different perspective. This is very common in shamanism, where we merge with helping spirits, or we merge with, we merge with helping spirits like power animals, for example, to see things through their eyes, to experience things from another perspective. And then you realize, oh, wow, this is really a possibility. This is really something something that I can experience, and that my ordinary reality experience is like this tunnel. I've got like tunnel vision. This is what's real here. But if you start doing sort of have psychonautic experiences, um, whether that is shamanic or some sort of like holographic breathing or something else, you take entheogens. I'm not necessarily recommending taking entheogens, but you do those things and your entire world can shift in an instant. Everything you have perceived, and that's threatening to the ego. The ego will scream at you. That happened to that has happened to me lots of times. But I'm stubborn, so I scream back at my ego. No, we're doing this. We're doing this. I went through 2 years of initiatory training with my teacher, in which we were doing advanced initiations like every time we met and got together. And they got more and more intense as the 2 years progressed. And in fact, that initiatory program is called Becoming the Hollow Bone, as I was speaking about. Until there were some things that some people were just like, I can't do that. Like, that's not something I can put myself through. And there were times where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And then I just was stubborn. I'm like, I don't care what it is. I'm doing it. I'm just doing it. And I'm so glad I did. I had some of the most profound spiritual experiences, some incredible paranormal experiences that if I told you about, you would think might think I was a little bit crazy, but I was not you know, I very often will check if there are other people in the room. If I just have an experience, I might chalk that up to like, oh, I'm, imagining something or whatever. But, when you're in a room with 20 people and something paranormal happens and they all experience it, or something, I shouldn't say paranormal, but something kind of miraculous happens. Um, uh, it lends credence, kind of thing. Anyway, sorry, I got a little distracted. So I have messages coming in. I try not to be too distracted, but people like to get in touch with me early in the morning. Um, so anyway, we are. Oh, well, you can. You can definitely have some powerful spiritual experiences with a teacher or on your own, but feel free to reach out. I'm happy to uh, talk to you about that as well. Um, yeah, so I did some very powerful initiatory training, in which, it was frightening at times, but um, it was profound, and it creates this huge paradigm shift, and that's the idea. The idea is that we are often really caught up in our little worlds, our reality tunnels, and we can switch tunnels for a period of time. And your ego will scream at you and say, if you do this, this is the underlying thought. You won't necessarily have this conscious thought, um, but your ego is sending signals to you that are saying, if you do this, you will die. If you do this, you will die. Um, and you won't. And intellectually, that you're not going to die. You know that there are people looking out for you, and that what you're doing is actually not that physically dangerous. Intense, yes, absolutely intense. And you cannot be not changed by these experiences. But what it really points to is that we have this little individuated consciousness, this little individual uh, experience of the world, this reality tunnel, as Robert Anton Wilson described it. He was he practiced something, I think he called it radical agnosticism, in which he basically said, I cannot, you cannot know anything, because everything you're experiencing is subjective. So, he took offense to somebody said, to anybody saying, I know X, Y, or Z. You can say, I believe this, or I'm experiencing this, but you can't really know anything, which is kind of an interesting perspective. Um, but we can experience things, and so you can have a small experience of this if you can intend. Intention is a really powerful tool, and you can try this on your own and see. You can intend, say, just for the next 10 minutes, I am going to allow source consciousness to work through me as I'm going about my day, as I'm doing things. As I'm just going to hold the intention, my ego is going to step out of the way for a few minutes. The more and source consciousness is going to come through and take over. There's a saying, and I can't remember where it comes from. There's a saying, be not the doer. Be not the doer. We get really caught up in doing stuff. This doesn't mean this mind and body isn't doing anything. It just means I, my spiritual sense of self is not taking credit for it, is not back here trying to control anything. And what's interesting is when you do this thing, oftentimes whatever you're like, you'll feel like, well, if I give up control of this, I'm going to screw it up. And you won't, because your body and mind doesn't stop existing. It's just that you cease to identify with the doingness. And what you're identifying with is your beingness. You are being, you are being. That's just it. Um, And so you can practice this and just have the intention. I'm going to step aside and observe. I'm going to take observer position and allow my body and mind to work on their own, and know that source takes care of all that. and you can sink into source a little bit and just have you can have a spiritual experience in your day-to-day life. If you remember to do this throughout the day, I'm sorry, this is a real I have to swear you all to secrecy. This is a very advanced, secret, mystical exercise that I'm broadcasting on Facebook and YouTube. It's not a secret. I'm just kidding. I don't necessarily believe in keeping things secret too much. Things I've sworn oaths to keep secret, I will do, and things that I think are potentially dangerous if done in the wrong hands. I remember like learning some stuff in martial arts training that there was no practical purpose for other than to hurt people. It was not a self-defense thing or whatever. And I was like, I will never teach this to anybody because it doesn't seem ethical to me. All this stuff like, where you hit somebody and then 3 days later they have organ failure. Well, you're not defending yourself anymore 3 days later. Um, you know, in the moment, if you need to defend yourself, yes. But then after that, you don't need that person to have organ failure 3 days later. And so I refuse to teach that stuff. Anyway, there's not much spirituality that I won't teach people. It's just that there are certain things that you have to have certain previous experiences to really grasp, really understand, really go through. And that's where teaching comes in. That's where finding a teacher, um, finding a spiritual teacher that's good, that you connect with, that can present things in a way that works with your model and also leads you to have experiences, leads you to have spiritual experiences that are um, profound and deep and life changing. And in that respect, I don't necessarily, I'm not, there's nothing evangelical about me. I am not telling people like you need to study with me and my way is the only way. I don't believe that at all. And I tell people, before I take somebody on as a student, I meet with them and I'll tell them shamanism is not for everyone. And what I'm screening for is fit, like, are we a good fit to work together? And B, are you really interested in doing the work, doing shamanic work? Because there might be another path that's better for you. And if you try to shoehorn yourself into like, I heard shamanism was cool or something like that, but does it speak to you? And does doing like you'll get out of it whatever, the amount of work that you put in, like most things. But if you don't feel a calling to it, you're not going to want to put the work in. And so, maybe find something different. And anything can become a spiritual experience. And I just described one way that can become a spiritual experience by going into flow state, into a spiritual flow state. I should probably I'm gonna write a book on spiritual flow state and give practical exercises for entering into flow. But you can enter into flow with spirit. And if you look at anybody who is really, really good at something, or anybody who can absorb themselves in something they're doing, I often talk about professional athletes. Like when you look at somebody who is anything from a pro basketball player to an archer to somebody, and they are in the zone, and what they're doing is happening through them as opposed to them, struggling and whatever. And oftentimes you'll see people that make things look effortless. You can watch chefs. I can't remember this guy's name, but he's a chocolatier. He's a French chocolatier, and he makes these crazy things. He makes like giant pterodactyls out of chocolate, and then he'll make these little tiny like amazing things that look like it's a chocolate, but it looks like a coconut, or crazy stuff. And you can tell that guy is just in the zone. He's just at peace. He's just doing what he does for the art of it. Anything like that can become a spiritual experience for you. You can live your life as a spiritual experience. You can work, even if, you can work, whatever your work is, you can do that and have a spiritual experience from that. So with that, I'm going to leave you for today. Um, I got to run and go pay the bills, and but thank you all for joining me. I do Um, I do have a free class at 8 p.m. Eastern time this Thursday on the Learn It Live platform, on spiritual alchemy. It's just an hour long, so it's just going to go through some of the basics of spiritual alchemy. If you're at all interested in that, I would encourage you to go over to Learn It Live and check that out. Again, it's free. It's recorded as well, so if you can't make the live class, you can still sign up and view the class afterward. And I do a lot of I'm doing this, and I'm doing another class in June, and I can't remember the topic at the moment, um, feel free to sign up and join in. I try to do stuff like this whenever when I can. As a way to I love teaching, and so teaching these are these are part of that, and doing free classes every now and then are part of that as well. So take advantage if you want to learn some stuff. So very cool, very cool. Hope to see you there. And like I said, it's free, and you can, if you can't make it live, you can sign up and catch the replay anytime you want. You do have to sign up for a Learn It Live membership, which I believe is free. I mean, they do have a paid membership, but that gives you certain perks. I don't know what they are. I'm not selling anything. It's just they give me a platform to teach through, and that I do. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining, and you're always the first one to come in and wish me good morning. So I appreciate that. I appreciate all of you and joining me, and it's really great. Always have a really great conversation. It's nice to see familiar faces. It's nice to see new faces. Um, my love to all of you, and enjoy the rest of the week. I may do another one of these on Friday. I have to see what my schedule brings. I am in for whatever reason, a really, really busy time. I've got new students coming in. I'm teaching multiple classes, and I've got a ton of client work as well. So that's all a good thing. And you know, I will try to keep regularly doing these because I really enjoy them, and I really enjoy connecting. You are so welcome. Nice to see you, my friend. And we'll catch lunch or something next week after prom. Our daughters all go to school together, and prom is this week, and all kinds of stuff going on. So it's a very busy time of year as things are wrapping up. Um, Take care, everybody. Enjoy your day. We'll